You're listening to episode 105 of the D6 podcast.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. How are we doing today, Ron?
Better than you. You just did that opening like 28 times and nobody heard it. I wish they could hear all those. I'm still crying.
That is not fair.
I am crying.
I tell people secrets about you, not the other way around.
This is revenge time.
So, speaking of revenge, he just told me, guys, I need help out here, especially my youth ministry friends.
Oh, my.
Ron just told me that he had a choice between a Mac and a PC. Do you guys know what he chose?
No. You're not telling this exactly fairly.
He chose a PC.
I did not choose a PC. I felt the PC was picked for me.
What? You're the head guy around here.
And so sometimes the head person has to make choices that are selfless.
Oh, so you needed to save D6 a little money and get a less.
That's exactly what it. Yes, that's exactly what it came down to.
I can handle that.
Mac has changed their laptop configuration. I'm going to justify this, and I will quickly say I'm going through a trial period of whether or not I like the PC.
Oh.
So it's not a firm commitment, but...
wouldn't we all love to be in that position where we could just try computers, and if we don't like it, whip up another one?
Well, I get to hand it off to somebody else who needs it, and it'll be a really nice computer, and they will love it. That is the beauty of it.
That's what my dad used to do. He'd buy a computer if he didn't like it. Hey, here's an upgrade for you.
That's right. So, no, the Mac, let me just kind of whine here for a bit. Mac has changed their laptops to where you can't open them up and replace the hard drives and the memory on your own, like you could up until 2012.
Okay.
They've now sealed them in such a way that you cannot go in there and part them out. And
I've never even considered that.
We have always souped up our laptops with super high-end hard drives and memory.
What are you doing here at D6 where you need to soup things up?
Well, when you deal with publishing, there's a lot of picture files. Publishing is it's not like a Word document. Word document is very small in capacity. The moment you have an InDesign or an Illustrator file, a Photoshop file, those are huge storage issues.
Fair enough.
And so to get the right hard drive and memory, it costs about $2,000 more for that machine than it does for this PC, and my IT guy has sworn to me, he said, if you'll try this, you'll fall in love. So I'm doing this to prove him wrong, but if he turns out to be right, I saved the company about $2,000.
Oh, look at you. There you go. Well, okay, Mac lovers, we'll have to forgive him, I guess.
I'm going to put a Mac logo on it over the logo if I keep it. I will say that.
Okay, and so that's not the only gift that's coming up for you and I.
No.
Here's why, because in just a few weeks, we have Mother's Day, which is okay. But then we have
Father's Day.
Father's Day. What do you get for Father's Day as presents?
I get a card.
That's what you get?
Get a card.
That's what I have to look forward to with adult children?
You never know. You never know. You know, if they spend time picking it out and write a personal note in there, I'm happy with that.
So, okay, can I tell you what I get?
What do you get?
I get super excited.
Yeah.
I've changed it. It used to not be much. But now, starting last year, I've started collecting Air Jordan sneakers.
Ooh.
A bit of a sneakerhead, all right?
Snob.
I know. I get it.
Yeah. How many pairs do you have?
We'll save that for later.
Another episode?
I don't want to be weird about this. Some people appreciate that. Some people will judge me.
But you put me out there for people to judge me.
Okay,
What's wrong with this?
I have 4 pairs of Air Jordans.
Okay.
But on Father's Day,
you'll have 5.
I'll have 5.
You only have 1 child?
I have 2 children. They're going to combine. It's an expensive gift. Anyway, so I love Father's Day and I love Mother's Day. Now, It would be cool for ministers to give presents.
It would be, and we're not offering Air Jordans.
No, I do not think it'd be good, or you wouldn't keep your job long if you gave the fathers Air Jordans. But there are other presents that are a little bit more economically friendly from D6 that you can give to the mothers and fathers on their special day. Let's talk about it, Mr. Ron Hunter.
Well, not to be Air Jordans, we're offering Deuteronomy 6 bookmarks. So that classic verse and these words, which I command you today, that passage, we're putting on really cool bookmarks. One that's got a more plaid imprint, one that's got a floral imprint. Really cool looking, very simple, and you can buy them in bulk very, very inexpensively.
I'm picturing the ushers at the door just handing them out, or a bulletin inside the bulletin, all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to order those, you can go to our website, d6family.com. And you can also call into our 800 number, 800-877-7030.
And if they want to step up their game just a little bit more, there's another piece.
That's right.
That you guys are offering, a father's legacy and a mother's legacy. What does that mean?
Well, they are small booklets. They are not big. They are very, very small. The page count's 48 pages. You can thumb through them, and they have quotes from some of the best parenting books we've ever published. And so you get a rich amount of content from multiple authors, and you can almost just read one of those each day with your devotional reading time, just as a reminder how to step up your game on parenting.
So if we get these and hand them out during a Sunday service, the parents will have something to read during the sermon.
That's right. I'm not going to go any further with that about content and richness of content. No, not going to do that. But I do think this is an affordable way that you can make people feel very appreciated and have a wonderful gift. And by the way, these are not just for Mother's Day and Father's Day. If you're having a women's retreat or a men's retreat, nothing on this says fathers alone. It says men, and one is a parenting side. So this is a year-round gift, even though it's probably more widely sold at this time of the year.
Okay, we do have guests today. We should probably sometimes you take chances on a no name.
Yeah,
and that's what we're doing today.
We hope you're okay with this name.
When you look for up-and-comers, and you're trying to think, okay, we should give people a shot, right?
Yeah.
That's part of what D6 does.
We do. It's kind of an equal access issue, and this guy just called and asked to be on it, and we looked and we said, okay, we'll find an opening.
So I'm excited. We're talking about helping parents answer tough questions with Josh McDougall. Is that McDougall?
I think that's a W.
Oh, Josh McDowell.
Yeah, I know you've never heard of this guy, but he's Sean's dad.
Okay, Sean's dad.
Sean asked us, could we interview his dad?
Sean was amazing last week, so maybe his dad might be cool. Cool. I'm excited about that. After the break, we'll be hearing more from Josh McDowell, and then a little bit later we'll be hearing from Daughtry. You interviewed him, so let's hear about him.
Absolutely. He's going to share the 6 risk factors for adult kids of divorce. You remember last week we interviewed his wife Tammy Daughtry on co-parenting, and just 2 amazing people who are counselors, and they work in this area with blended families in some of the most insightful ways, and they don't just bring opinions to this, they bring real research to the answers. And so I'm very, very excited to have Jay on today, just after we pick on Sean's dad, which, by the way, Jeremy and I agreed we would try our best not to say Josh McDowell on this episode. But we loved Sean and Josh.
No, all joking aside, Josh McDowell is a living legend. I'll brag plenty on him during the interview. You'll hear more, and we will hear more after the break with Josh McDowell talking about how parents can answer tough questions, part 2.
D6 curriculum is centered on the discipleship philosophy found in Deuteronomy 6, that parents and grandparents should be primary in the discipleship of their children. To accomplish this, D6 curriculum aligns every age in church on the same biblical passage or topic. Family alignment serves as a catalyst for parents to have conversations with their children about faith in the home. D6 also provides many other tools to help parents and grandparents. Learn how D6 curriculum can empower parents in your ministry at d6family.com.
Would it be offensive if I called you a living legend?
It'd be offensive if you called me anything but that.
Josh McDowell is here with us. He's our guest. I'm going to talk about you for a second. You're a trailblazer for truth and relationships. been at the forefront of cultural trends and groundbreaking ministry for over 5 decades. Does that just ever blow you away that you've been doing it that long?
Yes, because it doesn't seem that long. It doesn't seem more than 5 years.
Really?
And it's been 50, yeah.
Oh,
I guess if you love what you do, time sails by. It just flies by.
Josh shares the essentials of the Christian faith in everyday language. You have engaged over 25 million people in 125 countries and written or co-authored 147 books. Man, it's an honor to have you with us.
Have you read
Thank
that many?
No, I can say that easily.
I haven't read all of my own books either.
I want to remind you that folks that are listening are age-graded ministers. And one of the big things that they're struggling with is helping and inspire parents to lead their kids spiritually. One of the things that stops them from that is fear. Fear that they don't have the right answers, fear that they're going to look dumb in front of their kids. They're worried about that. So one of the things that we want to give to them here at D6 is we want to give them words, some answers that they can do. And since we're about to talk about a resource that I'm going to put in their hands and give them a lot of answers. But I thought today on our podcast, we might just take a little bit of time and give them a little bit, answer just a few of the key questions that sometimes kids will ask and give them some answers. How about that?
I would love it.
All right.
I want to preface
Yes.
the questions with this. The key thing of parents passing their faith on to their children is relationships. Here's a phrase: rules without relationships lead to rebellion. Here's more: truth, the truth of God's word, the scriptures. Truth without relationships results in rejection. It's the relationship. And if any parent builds a loving, intimate relationship with that child, it'll probably take care of a lot of the fear, because you'll be able to correspond with that child, interact with that child, communicate with that child, where if you don't have the relationship, you are not communicating.
I love it. Okay. Well, let's jump into, I think we've chosen about 3 super big topics, and we're going to just try to get you to attack them real quick, if it's okay. So let's say this. What if my kid comes to me and says, Dad, if God is so loving, why can't he be more tolerant of sin?
What you hope you've already done there is build into your child certain concepts of who God is, who Christ is, the resurrection, the scriptures. What I pointed out to my children is that when we say God is love or God is holy, we don't mean that's a part of God. These are attributes. God is righteous, God is just, God is all-knowing, etc. These are not a part of God. Each one of them is something that is true of God in his very nature. And we say God is love, not a part of God. God in his very nature is love. And part of that is God is righteous. He's a holy God. And there's a lot of things God can't do probably, but here's one of the big ones. God cannot perform any reality inconsistent with his basic nature. He can't. He can't go against himself. And so whenever he sees sin, he can exercise his love just saying, oh, I want to overlook it, I want to tolerate whatever. But you have to realize his love is just part of who he is, but so holiness is just a part of who he is. So his holiness, his righteousness will say, no, that is evil. And this is why when Christ went to the cross, he was just as much man as if he'd never been God, just as much God if he'd never been man. And when Jesus said, it is finished, God not only poured out his holy love upon his son, but his righteousness, everything. When Jesus said, it is finished, the holy, just, righteous nature of God was what Romans 3 calls propitiated. It was satisfied, which set God through then to approach us in our sin without having to destroy us. But because of his very nature of righteousness, he cannot have fellowship with sin. And so that's why he won't tolerate it, because he loves us. And I would go on to say to my son, if something happened in our relationship that was wrong and I didn't deal with it, honey, my daughter, my son, it would eventually destroy us. It's the same thing with sin in our relationship with the Father.
See, you did that great. It's almost like you've done that before.
Well, it's probably the first time I've ever been asked that question. Now, come up with a new one.
Okay, how about this?
I've been waiting 7 years for a new question.
Okay, what was the last new question you heard?
How much do I love my wife? Nobody ever asked me that before.
I need to do that. But first of all, I'm going to ask you this. How can a loving God send people to hell?
Let me reverse that. Everyone I hear will say, how can a loving God send anyone to hell? Now let me ask you this question, and I never hear this. How can a holy, just, righteous God allow a sinful individual into his presence in heaven? It's the same problem. God is not just a God of love. That's something true of his very nature. True of his very nature is justice, righteousness, holiness, purity. And God can't set aside one attribute to exercise another attribute. Each attribute has to be exercised in the context of who God is. And this is why God has done everything he can to bring every person in the world to him through his Son, Jesus Christ, who is a propitiation, a satisfaction of God's holy, just, righteous nature. And so the biggest question for me is not how can a loving God allow sinful individuals to go to heaven, but how can a righteous God, a pure God, allow a sinful individual into his presence? Very easy, because Jesus Christ took that sin upon himself. And when he said, it is finished, the holy, just, righteous nature of God was propitiated, Romans 3, or satisfied. Or in other words, God was set free to deal with us in his love without having destroy us because of our sin. That's beautiful.
It is beautiful. I love the way you worded that. It's beautiful. Okay, one more. Let's do one more. And then I want to talk to you about your son a little bit.
I thought you were going to talk about my wife. Oh, I thought you were going to ask me to answer that question. Go ahead.
How much do you love your wife?
No. Go ahead, ask the question.
How do we know that Jesus actually lived?
That's quite easy. I would say to anybody, do you believe there's such a thing as truth? If they don't, I define truth to them and show them you can't live without believing in truth. You can't. Everybody come to the conclusion that truth is. And basically define truth, that which is the same as equal to the original. Like if I have a bottle of water and I say I have a liter of water, you say no you don't. I said yes I do. Now is your statement true and mine false, or is my statement true and your false? Now remember, truth is that which coincides with reality. So we would go to outskirts of Paris, France, to the International Bureau of Weights and Measures. We would take my liter of water and we would compare it with the original liter of water. If my bottle of water coincided with the original, then my statement is true and yours is false. But Jeremiah, if you drank some of mine, which you probably would behind my back, you drank some, I know you, then we compare it and it was not equal, so my statement was false. Or this is called the correspondence theory of truth. Is something is true if the statement corresponds with reality. If I say it is snowing out, but you go out there and there's no substance to find the snow falling from the sky, then my statement is false because it doesn't coincide with reality. Well, how do we know someone existed within history? The number one way you know, eyewitness accounts. Whether recorded in history books or what, eyewitness accounts. We have in the New Testament. Now, if I had a lot of time, I would go into how I know the Bible is true, how I can trust the New Testament historically. I can trust. I not only believe that, I know why intellectually I believe that. But you see, back then, they were wondering the same thing. How do you know Jesus lived? How do you know Jesus did this? How do you know Jesus went there? They were more concerned about it than anyone today. Why? They were dying for it. They were being martyred. And how'd they answer? Here was the Apostle John. They all answered this way. In 1 John 1, John said, how do we know? What our eyes have seen, What our ears have heard, what our hands have felt, we declare unto you. We were eyewitnesses. That is the best historical evidence. Then you have all the writings about Christ, the secular, Josephus, others, the scriptures, non-biblical sources, everything of Christ. In fact, from totally apart from the Bible, you can learn that he died on the cross, he was raised from the dead, people believed him as Savior and Lord, he forgave sins, etc. You can learn all that totally apart from the Bible. And if Jesus didn't exist, then Abraham Lincoln never existed. John F. Kennedy never existed. Did you see him? No. Then how do you know? Eyewitnesses. That's how.
Well, my goodness. I want to talk real quick about this book. Because
I was hoping we'd get to it real quick.
We are totally getting to it. This book right here is an updated and expanded, because it's a classic. When did you write it?
1972 started, yeah.
1972. And it's been how many copies? I mean, I can't even imagine.
I think it's around 6 million.
6 million.
In 50-some languages, yeah.
But you and your son.
The original, not this one yet now, the original was selected as one of the 13 most influential books on Christian thought in the last 50 years. And it was selected as one of the top 40 books of the last century, which I'm grateful for, because it means it's getting people into God's Word. Now, this book is a total, complete, not rewrite, revision. It is 65, 70% totally new.
Tell me about it.
Well, because here's the principle. Truth does not change, but its critics do. And questions that I was asked 35 years ago, many of them, they're different questions now. And I need to answer the new questions, but you still have to answer many of the old questions, because many of them go from culture to culture to culture for 1,000 years, the same question. But like in here, we have a whole section on, is there such a thing as truth? What is truth? 99% of people can't define truth. What is truth? You see, 30 years ago, that wasn't an issue. Today, it's huge issue. Then we have a whole chapter on, if there is truth, can you know it? Can you really know truth? There's a whole chapter on history. Can you know history? Is history objective? Is there consistent truth within history that you can know? And we had to show that. But one of the most incredible chapters here was written by my son, 90% of it. It's called, Is Christianity a Copycat Religion? Was it taken from the Roman gods and the Greek gods and all the other history and put together? And I think it's probably equal to any resource ever written on that in history. Is Christianity a copycat religion? But here's one of the issues now. You see, people today don't care if Christianity is true if they don't believe it's good. So we had to start out with some misconceptions that the average person in the street has about Christianity. And we had to show that Christianity is good. Because of the internet and others, I've heard so many negative things, most not even true, but it's framed people here. So I have to deal with that before they'll even consider the truth and the evidence. Yeah. And then we just had to redo it because of the tsunami of evidence, Jeremy. It has exploded. For the New Testament, for example, when I came out, even with the latest edition called the New Evidence Demands a Verdict. Now, this is just called, back to the old title, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. But in the last 10 years, we had a revised one called the New Evidence Demands a Verdict. I was able to document 24,618 manuscripts and scrolls of the scriptures. You know how many I can now?
How many?
You won't see this anywhere in print until this book is released October 3rd. Then others will copy it. I can now document, and I do it in there, in the chapter on the New Testament, 66,462.
Wow.
Number 2 in all history is the Iliad with 1,800. 64,500 difference between number 1 in history, the Bible, number 2 in history, the Iliad. Now, that speaks of volume. But see, nobody knows that. So I had to document it all. So we're answering questions in here that weren't being asked
Wow.
35 years ago. But parents are hearing those questions today.
Yeah.
A parent gets this, and just read the first 5 chapters. They won't have any fear talking with their kids. They won't at all.
That's good.
I will answer their questions. And there's nothing wrong with a parent saying, I don't know, but I will find out. And this is one thing this book would do. You have one resource you can go to for almost any question you're asked, and you can find out the answer in 800 pages, over 2,000 documentations. So that's why it's a totally new book.
I love the passion. Okay, we're at D6 conference. So it would be wrong for me not to ask a little bit of your experience of leading your own kids spiritually. I mean, Sean was out here earlier, an amazing young man. You did a great job.
And his mother.
And I was just about to say, probably more his mother. But
not more.
Walk us through the process of what it was like. Even no way to give it all, but maybe just a glimpse.
Probably what you want to do is ask my daughters and my son, what's it like growing up being Josh McDowell's son? Where you go, the spotlight's on you. First was relationships. I never had a relationship with my dad. When he wasn't trying to kill my mother, I was trying to kill him. Literally. I mean, that's not metaphor. I had to learn how to build a relationship with my kids, because rules without relationships lead to rebellion. So first I had to build a relationship. But that's you're always building it. Second, I almost never answered my children's questions. Now, most parents think that's horrible. But I feel I'm responsible to my children to educate them, to teach them how to think, how to draw conclusions, how to reason. And when I would answer my children's questions about Jesus, the Bible, Scripture, God, life, then they're always Dad's answers, not theirs. So I would turn around, start asking them questions back. And I would lead them, and I always could, no matter what it was, I could lead them to the point where they came up with the right answer. But it wasn't just Dad's answer, it was their answer. That builds within a child a worldview and convictions. Then third, along with preparing our kids for life, to make right choices and everything, I negotiated with my kids. Now, most books on parenting say that's horrible. You're the father, you're the mother. You just tell them what to do and that's right. Raise them God's way. Well, I think I raised my kids God's way. I negotiated with my children. Why? I need to raise my children how to make right choices. Morally, economically, politically, socially, everything. And like one time my daughter said, Daddy, what time do I have to be home at the dance? It was a dance at a school she was going to. And I said, what time do you think? She said 11:30. I said, honey, I think 10 o'clock. But Dad, everyone want to be there. Well, honey, let me tell you why I say 10 o'clock. Now, honey, why would you say 11:30? Would be good for a father to say yes. My kids always start out, Dad, you taught me to be a trustworthy kid. Oh, that hurt. Come home at midnight. No. And then I say, well, how about 10:50? How about 11 o'clock? And we settled on 10:45. That's where I was going anyway. But you see, my daughter was part of the process. I got to tell you, this is no little thing. It causes them. She heard why I thought she ought to be home at this time. I heard why she thought that time. They both were some great ideas, everything. And we negotiated, came out with a great time. Now, when it comes to moral things like drugs and everything else, I don't negotiate. But my daughter wanted to get a tattoo, a rose on her ankle. And she first went to her mother, which was a big mistake. Oh, no, you can't do this and everything. And so Daughtry came to me and said, honey, what do we do? Katie wants to get a tattoo on her ankle. And what would people at church say? Others? I said, honey, now remember, we never raise our kids by what others will think. We raise our kids by the way what we think is right and will be pleasing to the Lord. And if we do that and others don't like that, then there's a problem, not mine. And so I said, let me handle it. She said, no way. I said, honey, let me handle this before it gets out of hand. So I took her out and we went to her favorite ice cream place. I said, hey, Katie, your mom says you want to get a tattoo. She has it, and then she just, oh yeah, Dad, I want to, friends are this and that. I said, tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I'll share with you why I don't think it's a good idea. And then when I finish, if you will sincerely pray about it, I'll go with your decision. And if you still want to get a tattoo, I will not only take you down to get it, I will pay for it. But what about Mom? I'll deal with Mom. She'll be in agreement. She never brought it up again. I can't tell you how many situations like that was never brought up again.
That's great wisdom. I need to make sure you get to your next appointment. So
yeah, you do.
So I'm going to go ahead and close this up, but I want to make sure people know if they want to find Josh McDowell online, they can go to the coolest domain ever, josh.org. That's it. That's all they have to remember.
That's it, josh.org.
I won't forget the day.
You probably just go to Josh without the org, and the good, the bad, and the ugly will come up.
I won't forget the day I sat with Josh McDowell and had a conversation. I really thank you.
Well, I will never forget the day I was interviewed by you.
All right. Thank you very much.
D6 curriculum is a comprehensive discipleship strategy for all ages in your church. Solid biblical content teaches wise decision-making, and the curriculum emphasizes a biblical worldview. Each quarter of D6 curriculum contains 3 studies, 1 Old Testament, 1 New Testament, and 1 special topic study addressing cultural issues, apologetics, and Christian living. D6 is great for use in life group, small group, or Sunday school. D6 curriculum is affordable and easy to use. You can order teaching materials in print or digital format. See how D6 curriculum gets every age on the same page at d6family.com.
Well, it's pretty easy to see where Sean got his passion, isn't it?
I know. I just can't get over that domain name. Like, wouldn't you love to have ron.org?
Oh, yeah. But,
man,
you know, Josh can pull off so many things.
Well, it's because he was around when, you know.
Yes.
We're going to stop there.
We are.
Josh, thanks for being with us, man.
We
I feel
love
like
you.
we've not shown you proper respect today.
We hope you
think you're amazing.
In my family, if we picked on you, we loved you.
There you
and
go.
so I think you can show an immense amount of love coming from this podcast towards Sean.
Trust me,
Sean's dad.
I feel like he could handle it because
He
that
could.
man was super, super fun. Thank you, Josh, for honoring us with your presence on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And now, speaking of being honored, let's talk about Jay Daughtry. He is really, really going to help us with an issue that most of us face in our churches. All of us face. Helping parents who've been through divorce.
That's right. There's a stigma, and he's going to help us through those stigmas and what are those 6 factors and what does the research have to say about it. I hope you hear these little tidbits and ask, and I'm willing to bet that somewhere near half of our total audience, you are kids of divorce. See if this doesn't resonate with what you have struggled with. Well, for our listeners, you will remember that on a previous podcast, we had Tammy Daughtry, and we are privileged today to have her husband, Jay Daughtry. Welcome to the D6 podcast, Jay.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I think all of our listeners loved listening to Tammy, and I'm excited because I know what you're going to be talking about. We're continuing that theme for blended families, that co-parenting, and what that means. But before we jump in, and I'm ready to jump in, let me tell our listeners who you are. Jay, you come to us with a lot of ministry background and a lot of expertise. You were a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene for over 20 years. You're currently serving as a marriage and family therapist. You received your master's from Trevecca. You're the co-founder for the Center for Modern Family Dynamics, which is a counseling center based here in the Nashville area that you founded back in the spring of 2014. And I know you're ministering to a lot of families and a lot of kids of divorce. You personally have a blended family. You have 4 kids. You have 2 sons-in-laws. And you have 2 grandkids with 1 on the way. So with all of that, I say thank you for taking everything God has woven into the fabric of your life, and now you're filtering it back out to help all of us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having us on here. And I like to hear Tammy, too. I hear a lot of her from day to day, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. I can tell every time you're together, you guys love each other. It's a beautiful marriage you have, and it's a beautiful ministry that you have working together. Jay, when we were sitting over lunch and we were listening to everything that you and Tammy were involved in with your center and your counseling of so many different families, you talked about some of the research that has been done. And being a child of divorce, when my parents divorced when I was 15, you said there were 6 risk factors for adult kids of divorce. I'd like for you to talk through, just give people a summary of those 6, and then we're going to just jump back into one of them here in a minute.
Yeah, that sounds great. As we know, I think it's no surprise to anybody that there is a very strong stigma about what happens to families when they go through divorce. And of course, a big part of the research and the focus has been, how does this affect our kids? What's happening in the lives of our kids? And so in the process of putting some of that research together, they took a strong look at, okay, so what is going on for kids and what are the indicators that are telling us they're headed for trouble, that they're going to be, engaging in risky behaviors and finding ways to numb out or, having bad reactions to things. So there were 6 things that they listed, and those 6 risks are parental loss, economic loss, lack of parental competence, more life stress for the children, parental adjustment to divorce, and of course, interparental conflict. Now, those 6 different factors, those are factors that they recognize that the more prominent and the more present those factors are in the life of children in a post-divorce world, the more likely they are to have negative outcomes for themselves. So we all know what those negative outcomes are because we've seen that, whether it's drug use or promiscuity, anger and antisocial behavior, bad grades, all of these things. And so for years, we've just told parents, oh my gosh, you've gotten a divorce, you've ruined your kids. And that's not necessarily the case. Because what I like to do is take this research and flip it on its head. Okay, yes, so you've shown us there are all these risk factors, and the more they're present, the more negative outcomes that will be there for our children. But if we flip it on its head and say, well, what if we mitigate or minimize this factor?
So walk us through one of those. Take one and flip it on its head and tell us what it would look like.
Right.
Okay.
So for instance, parental loss. Well, it seems like kind of a silly thing. Well, duh, of course they're parental loss. You've had a divorce and now the kids don't have mom and dad there 24/7. They've only got mom part-time and dad part-time, whatever that shared parenting looks like. Well, the way we minimize that loss for children, though, is the research shows that if kids have equal access to both parents, and that if the parents can learn to function in a way in their co-parenting relationship that allows kids to have the permission to love both, to enjoy both parents, that permission and freedom to love and enjoy both parents, and that opportunity to have access to both parents on as much of an equal basis as possible is going to minimize the parental loss that they typically are going to experience post-divorce. And in fact, if they do it well, that factor becomes a non-factor. So that's some of the stuff that we try to help people understand and look at research like this. On the one hand, that seems very negative. Oh my goodness, what do we do? Well, what we do is we flip it on its head and we find ways to counteract what might possibly be.
So let's talk about the factors, because I truly believe some parents do not realize the effect it has on their kids. Talk through the parental loss indicators so that they can help identify, are their kids really stuck in between two worlds?
I think some of the things that you'll see there is almost without fail, parents are going to fall into a couple of different roles and categories, right? We all do that.
Yes.
Various relationship roles in the marriage and in the household. And so when it comes to kids, let's, for instance, take the disciplinary roles. Well, typically we have one parent that's kind of the nurturer. Then we have the other parent that's sort of the enforcer, right? And together, they have a whole parenting unit that gives the child both sets of what they need. They've got the expectations that are being lived out and consequences if necessary.
But in divorce, then you have the one who's still trying to discipline the other one who's the fun
so
parent.
So now
theoretically.
you take those two parents apart and you have two different households and you have the same child. And in one household, all of a sudden all the discipline's gone because they're with the nurturer.
Exactly.
In the other household, all there is discipline and their heart is not being nurtured. And so now there's the challenge for the child because we talk about them having that divided heart. And so this parental loss leaves them in a place of trying to figure out, well, where do I really belong and what is the truth of how I'm being raised? And they start to get anxious. They lose some security. There's a lot of security in knowing that mom and dad are okay. Well, when mom and dad are no longer okay, then the question is, I'm not okay. And what do I do with that? And so the challenge for parents, on the one hand, is not to denigrate one another, to make sure that they're offering as much access to the other parent as possible so that the child doesn't feel like they have to pick and choose, never put them in the middle or challenge their loyalties, but also then for those parents to recognize, here's my strength, what is my weakness?
Yes.
So if I'm the enforcer and I'm the one who knows how to lay down the law and get the expectations and put together consequences, I've got to figure out how do I connect with my child's heart though. I've got to discipline them. I've got to direct them. I've got to raise them well, but I also have to connect with their heart because the last thing I want to do is for all of my rules to turn into a billy club of guilt and shame that breaks the spirit of my child. Right?
So how do you get the parent to change when that's their natural bent? You know, the dad or the mom, whichever one is that nurturer, the fun parent, the other one who is, you know, they care about boundaries more and they don't view themselves as a bad parent, but the child might. How do they, when they were once together, begin to make that change? They say, I want to, but I don't know how. Give them a couple of how-tos on these final 30 seconds that we have.
Well, the how-tos really at least for me, I know in my own experience, for me, I've got to lean into what I'm not comfortable with, and that is, I got to say, I'm more of a nurturer. You know, I'm a little more lenient. So I have to figure out, okay, what are the things I can put in place to help myself follow through, to be consistent, to have expectations and consequences and have those expressed thoroughly. So what I need to do is I need to find those resources. Maybe I have a parenting class that's being offered by my church or in my community. Great parenting books all over the place out there. And when we read those parenting books, we can't just lean into the thing that we know, which is what our tendency is. Ooh, I like that. I'm going to read that a lot.
Yes.
But lean into the thing that doesn't quite fit, and we go, I'm not sure I understand that, and it doesn't really fit the way I feel, but I need to be intentional about teaching myself those things, recognizing that the benefit of this is for my child.
Yes.
When I become a whole parent, a complete parent, then I am helping them avoid all of these various negative outcomes that we always hear espoused about children of divorce. We can turn that around.
So you have used a phrase that I also heard Tammy use before. It's one heart, two homes. And this ability to lean into our uncomfortable area allows to nurture that one heart without blaming, well, that's your mother's rules or that's your father's rules. It's still that one heart that we're nurturing from a unified front. That's what I'm hearing. And I hope our listeners are hearing that.
Yes.
Tell them in closing where to find more resources about what you and Tammy do together if they want to dive a little further, because we talked about 6 factors, but we only went into one of them. So let's go a little further here.
That's
give
right.
them some resource. Give them your website.
Yeah. You can find us at co-parentinginternational.com. And there at the website, you'll see a number of different resources available. Some of those are free downloads. There's some video clips, some different PDFs that they can print off, have some handouts to use. But we've also developed a curriculum called One Heart, Two Homes. And there is 5.5 hours of digital content there, a workbook that goes along with it. And all you need is someone who has a passion for that to come alongside and open the doors and open those books and come together and say, okay, we know we've got some things to work on. Well, let's just go through it. Let's see what's there. And so all of those things are available through our website at coparentinginternational.com.
Thanks, Jay, for being a part of the D6 podcast.
Thank you.
Well, our thanks go to Jay. That was, I think that was my first time to hear Jay. And okay, you're kind of as cool as your wife, Tammy. I'm down with that.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, listen, I am loving how the church has transitioned on this topic, because I was a youth minister back in the 90s, and there was a season in the particular place where I was serving where, in my opinion, we were not willing to address this subject because it kind of felt like it was condoning something and all these things. And I just simply love how the church has kind of, in my opinion, grown to the place where we are showing grace and love and help and concern to families that are in a very real crisis. And we have stopped making people feel less than and are hopefully starting to make them feel loved. And
Absolutely.
that's the goal.
Yeah.
So thank you for people like Jay and Tammy who are helping us get there.
You know, without a doubt, I think Jesus' greatest criticism was for who he ministered to when the religious leaders thought he should minister to somebody different. And I'm very thankful that when we're reminded that our goal is to minister to hurting people, we realize that the family, the divorced parents, they're part of the hurt, but the kids, speaking as one who's been there, we compartmentalize. You know, we live one world with dad, we live another world with mom, and they're hurting too. So the parents are certainly hurting, their spouses, but so are the kids. And I'm with you. I'm so blessed by churches who are willing to address that topic. You're spot on, Jeremy.
All right, so next week we go from one living legend to another. Our man, Timothy Paul Jones. And if you have not listened yet to our episode 100 celebration, episode 100 and 101, because one podcast could not contain the greatness of that, you know, the topic was family ministry, where we've been, where we are, where we might go. That's in essence, that's what next week's interview is, and that's in essence what that was. So I feel like this is a beautiful continuation of that talk. And Timothy Paul Jones nailed it. And then our second interview, when I saw this name come across the sheet, I was like, no way. We are going to have Jim Weidman here. And that name, for a lot of people, is a name that has impacted their lives. So I'm so excited about that.
I am too. Jim was a great interview. And, you know, Jim is calmer today than he used to be. He's always had rich wisdom nuggets that when I ask him a question, I'm expecting one thing, and he goes deeper and he's more applicable than I even thought.
Yes.
And this interview was the same way.
Well, next week on Tuesday, look forward to it. Timothy Paul Jones and Jim Weidman. That's not a bad lineup. We aren't going to have to say anything. We're just going to say press play.
That's right.
All right. Hope you guys have a great week of ministry. We'll talk to you then.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leader.net.